Good evening, councillors, and good evening to our guests this evening, and good evening to our staff members who have taken the time to be with us also. Before we go any further, we'll seek the acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge the Ngadjuri and the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. We'll move on to our attendance. Do we have any apologies? No apologies, no leave of absence, and no non-attendance. The next matter, councillors, is matter number 3, confirmation of the previous council minutes. The meeting held on Tuesday, the 28th of February. Would someone like to move that those minutes be a true and correct record of that meeting? Thanks, Councillor Bill. Someone like to second that? Councillor Dean, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. We move on to our communications, and you may notice on your desks tonight there's a folder that will be made available to you at each meeting. These folders contain information designed to assist elected members during meetings. A copy of our code of practice for meeting procedures is in the folder, so you can keep me on my toes. There's a guide outlining meeting processes in line with the LGA Act, regulations and our code of practice, along with the example provided to us by Normans at our training day. There is also a guide summarising conflicts of interest and a form which members will need to complete and hand to the minute taker to declare interests. This will assist members and staff in accurately recording these details as per the legislative requirements. Please do not take the folders with you. They will be retained at council so they can be made available to you at the next meeting. If you would like any further information or assistance, please speak to our governance team, and Kari is here tonight. We have no requests for documents to be tabled, and we have no petitions at this stage. We move on now to our communications. I've got 2 running sheets here, so you need to forgive me. I had a busy time over this period, although a little bit of a quieter time with the media, although we did have a couple of things we need to speak about, which included a letter we received from Nick Champion's office in relation to some planning matters, but that's all been resolved. The U3A, I'm president of U3A, which is a University of Third Age, you might recall. U3A is a very important function within our community. They have a choir, a ukulele group with about 35 members, and various other functions like a book club and a Tai Chi and a fitness club, etc. Always struggling, however, to form a committee. People like to be part of these particular activities, but quite often haven't got time to be part of the organising of them. But fortunately, I've been blessed with a few people who have put their hand up once again. So U3A will remain an important aspect of our life in our communities for people over the age of 50 that can get out and get involved. I also attended a suicide prevention evening held at Gavin Schuster's property in Freeling. It's not the first time that Gavin has done that, and he's been a great advocate for suicide prevention, and he takes this matter particularly seriously. It was an excellent night, extremely well organised, as you would expect, and the attendance was large, and refreshingly, a lot of young people were there, where a lot of the message that was being presented that night was targeting those young people. It was an excellent function, and it was called Chew the Fat, and the people who were there certainly did that, and the presenters also were first class. We continue with our street corner meetings. We had 2 in Freeling, and I really commend Brenton Mistos for this. When there's going to be works taking place in our communities, it's nice to see that the community are invited to have a say in what their roads and their footpaths might look like after what's being proposed. And this has happened a couple of times in the last month or so, and it's worked particularly well. And a number of people on both occasions had some contribution to the evening and walk away satisfied they're being listened to and their requests are being acted on in most cases. Also, we had the pleasure of attending the Lord Mayor Jane Lomax-Smith's civic reception. Councillor Zeller and Councillor Emery, along with myself and I guess probably 60 odd councillors from around the state and mayors from around the state attended that occasion, which was a precursor to Minister Brock's next day partnership forum, which was held at the convention centre. I must take my hat off to Brocky. He, in all due respects, he got behind this and organised this particular day, and it was attended by the Premier, Deputy Premier, and other dignitaries, and 52 mayors and probably 60 councillors. So it was certainly something that was appreciated. Not a talk fest either. Something has come up. Oh, pardon me, Councillor Reichstein was at that function too. Gee whiz. And Councillor Close, oh, forgive me. It's this running sheet. I'm just, I'm confused. And my apologies, councillors. But I think you will agree that what's come of this is there will be an accord developed with our state government and local government to work in closer relationships and in partnership in the future. We both blame each other. We blame the state government, and in many cases, the state government blame the council or local government. We've got to stop that, stop the blame game, and work together for the benefit of the whole state. And that was loud and clear, that message. And I think we got a good commitment from the state government Premier and Deputy Premier. So that's about me for the moment. Are there any council reports at this point? Councillor Lynn?
Spoke about how he went to the UK to see the submarine where that's being built, and it was absolutely fascinating what he actually saw in those 3 days. He went to a place called Barrel, and in the first room he went to, there was this great big cylinder being built, and he told us all about it, and no paperwork in front of him. It was very interesting to see how he and what he saw, and what we need to, if we are going down that track as a state. He also said that the United States and the UK actually took 60 years to build this orca from scratch, and then we've got 10 years to do it. So it was really interesting. Well, I found it really interesting.
Thanks for raising that, Councillor. It certainly was, and I think one of the statistics that came out of it were that this little village didn't start off much similar to our own town here, but now they employ 6,000 people. 6,000 people on one project. So we've got something to look forward to in terms of job creation in the future. And they train young people in a separate facility, which is very, very large to take on the roles in the future. But as Councillor Lynn said, it took them 60 years to get to that stage.
That's good.
But we know a lot more than they did back 60 years ago, so we should be able to hit the ground running pretty much. And hopefully for our state in particular, this will be a match winner. So we'll see where it leads. Anything further, councillors? If not, we will move on to our next matter. Tonight we have a deputation, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome and invite Anne Hornsey, Miss Anne Hornsey, who knows a lot about this particular council, and Barry Vogt, both from the Centenary Foundation of our wonderful Kapunda High School. Council would be aware that we support the Kapunda High School Foundation and have for many years, and we hopefully will continue to do that into the future. So I might invite Barry and to give us a little bit of a background, if you wouldn't mind, Barry, on where we're up to.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Members, I'm very pleased to explain tonight a little bit about the foundation, because it's great in a business-like manner to keep up the speed, and you being a major donor for us, we've appreciated the use of your name as a sponsor, and I think you should understand where the foundation's at. It's great that we've had some help from Lorinda Bailey ongoing, because we've had some negotiations each year just to continue this. And we got Anne is here as well. She's the backbone of the foundation in terms of the administration and secretarial work, and does a great job for the foundation. Is very respected in her role. So for some of the new councillors, I think you may need to understand a little bit more about the foundation. So I'll just give a little bit of history for that. The foundation came about after a 100-year celebration of education at the high school level in 2007. The formation of the foundation came about because they thought they should recognise the 200 years of education in Kapunda and have something ongoing. Consequently, the foundation was born in 2007. Along with that, the next student, Jim Billison, came and said he'd like to be part of forming that. Jim was a resident in Kapunda, went to the school. He was Dux of the school in 1949. He was Deputy Vice Chancellor of Adelaide University, and he's the founder of Codan. Codan was his business with a partner, which has been a very successful South Australian business into a lot of scientific type manufacture, and they have 400 staff in Adelaide, and I think a number of staff overseas. So Codan helped Jim fulfill his dreams. I guess that's what he's asked for here. Unfortunately, Jim passed away soon after we were given the okay to go ahead and utilise some funding from him. So he hasn't been able to appreciate just where the foundation's at. But his dream was to help secondary students go through and fulfill their dreams and be something in the future with things in mind that he went through. Being a country boy and studying in the city, he learnt that it was difficult to many ways and costly to that. That's why he was wanting to help any student who has some desires to go through with further education. And that's what we've been trying to encourage and achieve. Jim Bettison knew that if it was going to be successful, that he needs to put some funds up. So he actually gave us seed funding of a significant amount of money, which we were to invest, which we have done, and have ongoing. So in 100 years' time, the foundation is self-supportive, long before that, we hope, and ongoing. So the idea is long-term and to be able to service the students of the Kapunda High School. The commitment also has come through from the Arns Group, Johnson's, All Cover Roofing, Frank Ware's business, Light Regional Council, Thrift Shop, and various anonymous people have funded us through. Just to give you some idea of our size and capacity, each year we spend about $25,000 to $30,000 on awards to students. There's about 15 to 16 students each year. The school is now 650 odd students and growing to 800. So we've got to look forward to that growth as well, which is coming whether we like it or not. The school currently can't take any more students because it's at its capacity with the new facilities that are there. students have to win their way. They just don't get it hidden out. We came across a foundation recently that just if you applied, you got the money. And that's not really how it is here. We think they need to use this as a learning curve. It means they've got to prepare a CV, and they actually apply online, and we check that out and then ask them for an interview. So they're interviewed, and they've really got to sell themselves on us that they're going to go and do something in a serious nature after year 12. It's quite amazing how good those students are. They impress us every time. They've got things worked out, and many of them just need a little bit of extra assistance to help them over the line. And that's what we're about. I guess that's what our role is. So where do they spend their money? They spend their money mostly on computers and the important things they need. We find they're amazing the way they can be wise about the expense. They receive about $2,500 average per award, and they can make that last quite a long period of time. Some students get it for 2 years, some students get money for 4 years, depending on the award, which it is. So there's really no barrier for students if they're provided with the necessary support. We've actually got some wonderful students out and about. For instance, a top student in Oxford in the maths classes area. She's just done amazingly well, top in maths. We've had some Adelaide University students do wonderful things. Really at the top end, we're talking seriously about these students and what they've achieved. So Kapunda's name's around the world in many places, and the kids travel as well, which is great. So from optometry, teaching, engineering, agricultural, maths, fashion design, media, journalism, animal husbandry, computing, science, nursing. So you can see we're covering a big field. We actually have had 120 odd students, which we've funded, and we've spent $360,000 on them over the last few years. So it's a significant business operation in many ways to achieve. So the interesting thing is they often want to come back to the country. A number of the students are fully aware that there's need in the country for services of qualified people, and they've thought through the fact that it'd be good if they could go away, get some training and come back. And I think that's what we want with Kapunda growing as it is. It's great to have some people who've got some interest in that. And the current principal and new principal, David Marino and Tim Jones, are supporting us, although we're quite autonomous and not part of the high school. Our name includes that, but we work on our own, but get their support. So they're part of the selection committee along with Anne and myself, who judge whether kids are going to receive it. And most students do. If they get to that level, they mostly do. So they do also appreciate the fact that it's like a little bit of ongoing support, as if they still feel as if they're connected to the high school, and that's a great thing. We've been very fortunate in becoming a member of CEPA, which I don't want to confuse you with this, but the Country Education Foundation of Australia operates out of New South Wales. For us to get tax deductibility, we needed to join them. So it was a little bit of a hard decision for us because we were on our own doing well, but it's worked out to be a very positive result for us. They've got about 40 foundations, I guess, like we are throughout, not a few in South Australia, not very many. And they seek funds from other sources of businesses and then divide them around through the various ways. For instance, we had seed funding to start off with them for $8,000, and then we get funding for the students from the universities, $1 for $1 for $1 off of SA Uni. Flinders doesn't always come across, Adelaide Uni usually does. So the students can get an extra $1 per $1 that we give them because of the connection through CEPA. And just to give you some idea, and this is a real plus for the council, was for us, was that an unknown donor issued significant funds to CEPA and said, divide it up, we need $1 from you for every $1 we give you. And we were able to take the money that came from the council, and believe it or not, that meant an extra $13,500 over above the money we had received. So we had $15,000 from the council plus $13,500 because of the $1 for $1, we were able to time it up with the funding when it was paid to us from the council. So significant funds are available, which wouldn't have been if we hadn't had the council money. So SEF has been a very important part of us, and also a number of people do like the tax deductibility area of that. So it gives us a DGR status and whatever we need to get their funding back to them. So we appreciate very much the support of the council. It's surely great to be able to do as I've said. We wanted to hopefully continue our support, but we would like to have it, if we could, issued over 4 years. We've been year by year. We actually promised 4 years for some of the students, so we've got budget out in advance. And for us to find our 30,000 a year, we need to know there's something in the stream in advance. So if it's possible, the consideration from the council, if possible, would be for 5,000 a year, which has been giving us over the next 4 years. And we can keep the council updated if need be, but the 4 year would surely help us in our budgeting and our understanding. The students really appreciate the support they get and they receive, and they always mention it because we meet with them regularly if we need to. So the involvement of the council on behalf of the value of the worth and demonstrate the council clearly understands the needs of the people they respect. As for the foundation, we're a group of proven track record, have a history of growth, and a committee comprising a number of long-term committed community members. Hope that you will seriously consider our submission. We thank you for granting us the opportunity to address this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. Councillors, are there any questions you'd like to raise? Well, if not, I'd certainly begin by congratulating you and Anne and the rest of your team on your ongoing commitment to this program and the foundation. It is obviously a very well supported when you see the local businesses that have been involved over the years, and very much appreciated by the students, which is extremely important. You know, these students become ambassadors to our town. They're given the opportunity to further their careers, and in many cases where that might not have been available to them. It doesn't discriminate against rich people or poor people. I think that's you know, a very worthy goal to have as well. And the results to date have been outstanding, and some of the students come back here and then hopefully share their experiences with other young people as well. So we thank you very, very much, and this matter will be considered in our budget deliberations at our beginning at our April meeting. So sorry we aren't in a position to be able to commit tonight, but this will be discussed at our April meeting, and we'll certainly be in touch. But we look forward to the future with a lot of confidence. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillors, we have no adjourned business, so we can move forward now to 8.1, which is our action items. As we've been dealing with this page by page, I'll start with page 7. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Barry. Any matters on there that you would like a question? Not, we move to page 8. On page 8, page 9. Nothing on page 9. And page 10.
Sorry. I just had a question about the report and strategy to offset and neutralise energy for the light stimulus program. I was just curious to know a little bit more about that, and if there is a report, when it might be provided.
It's a very good question. I might pass to Megan. Thank you.
Thank you, through your chair. The report is likely to make the May council meeting.
Thank you, Megan. Anything further, councillors? If not, we move on to our recommendations from our committees. The first one is 9.1, and it's the CEO selection panel meeting. The first recommendation there is that the reports and minutes of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Special CEO Selection Panel meeting held Friday, the 10th of March be received. Would someone like to move that way? We have received them. They're in your council business papers. Councillor Lynn, someone like to second that? Councillor Allison, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thanks, councillors. Now, a recommendation too that items CPS 3.1, Light Regional Council CEO recruitment shortlisted candidates of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Special CEO Selection Panel meeting held Friday the 10th of March be considered by council under the confidential session of this agenda. Would someone like to move that way? Thanks, Councillor Michael. Someone like to second that? Thanks, Councillor Allison. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thanks, councillors. No, they're not quite. Just business as usual. Thank you, Doug. 9.2, councillors, the Strategy and Economic Development Committee meeting. We have a recommendation at the top of the page at the, I think you can all read. I don't think I need to read those out, do I? We have a recommendation at the top of the page. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor Biddle, someone like to second that? Councillor Fabio, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, are there any items that you wish to have withdrawn from item 9.2? Councillor,
I think we need to withdraw item number 5, the event spin sponsorship program, round 2 funding submissions received.
there's number 5. Any further matters, councillors? If not, we'll move to number 5, which is as a recommendation, number 5, and it was open for someone like to move the recommendation, which was Councillor Zeller. Yeah.
So put recommendation 2.
Okay. Right.
Wonderful.
Right.
That's it.
I've been advised and advised correctly that 5 and 6 have been withdrawn, which means we're able to adopt 1, 2, 3, and 4. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Dean, someone like to second that? Councillor Bill, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Councillors, we now move on to the first matter that's been withdrawn, which is matter SED 6.5, the event sponsorship program. Are there any updates from council officers in relation to this particular matter? If not, I'll open it up for.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. No, through the chair, thank you. I'd just like to highlight that I did provide an email with some additional background this afternoon in relation to this matter.
Thanks, Dean. Did everyone get that and got the information that was provided this afternoon? Okay, so we don't, and thank you, Craig. We don't need to go over that then. Are there any questions from of council officers on this item? Councillor Collin?
Actually, not a question. I just
I need it to be a question if possible.
oh, sorry. Right.
I had a question, Mayor Bill. I haven't had the full benefit of reading Craig's email, which thank you provided. And I know elected members have received some comments about the recommendation from the committee. So I just wonder if Craig might be in a position to explain that email the recommendation that was made to that committee.
Thank you, councillor Michael. Craig?
Yes, no, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillor Michael. Through the chair, the email simply, I guess, explains the background to this particular matter in order to provide a bit further context. So without going into too much detail, because there is some there, I was simply looking to highlight that the recommendation that came from council staff, as was considered at the committee, firstly, I should touch base and it was born out of a draft that I had provided additional input to before it was finalised. And I'll highlight here as well that I ought to have been an additional report author in that sense. But between the drafting, we realised that there was some additional funding available when we collected the community grants, the event sponsorship grants, and then also what was left over in the Heritage Incentive Scheme to provide a pool in the order of $8,500 that could be allocated to events. And the recommendation that was put to the committee was born out of an assessment, as is our normal process against the guidelines and the grant policy. And in that we established that one event that we've considered was worthy of regional event status, given it was under the umbrella of the festival, the Vintage Festival, being the Seville Silver Road Business Alliance matter. There was another one for contribution towards an Anzac Day event, which asked for an amount of about $300, and then there was the bowling club matter as well. In respect of the No Quiet matter, the assessment by staff was that it did meet a number of the criteria. However, in terms of its scale, we consider that it fit probably more comfortably as a local matter. And in terms of the funding available, we allocated a little bit a lesser amount, partly recognising that it's also has a commercial element to it as well, in that it's at a commercial venue rather than being run by a not-for-profit. But the point that I also make in the email that's been distributed is that whilst that's the recommendation of staff to the committee and from the committee to council, of course that's a recommendation and can be amended. And council is also welcome, if it chooses to and wishes to provide additional funding to broaden the amount that's available. And we would simply look at including that in a future budget review to find a suitable source for those additional funds if that's the will of council. There is a last point in relation to the email that I distributed, in that in the context of the discussions that we've been having around the event strategy, this particular item has also raised a few matters that would be beneficial, we think, to look at in the context of that strategy, if that's developed further in terms of how we look at how we develop a process to continually evolve to manage these sorts of matters into the future. Thank you, Neville.
Thank you, Craig. I was remiss of me earlier, councillors, to not welcome Daniel Hill tonight to our meeting. Sorry, Daniel. We don't normally do this, by the way, but I think you've made a special effort to be here, so we welcome you. Sorry, councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. So Craig, would you mind just explaining the distinction between a local and a regional event?
Certainly. So a regional event, I guess, has a criterion, and I don't have the wording in front of me to quote from, I'm sorry, but in terms of the guideline, actually I might be able to source that just quickly. Essentially, a regional event can be applied for by both a not-for-profit, but also a business with an ABN, or otherwise one that's auspiced by a not-for-profit group, an incorporated group. The distinction between the two really comes down to the number of visitors that are expected. So a regional event normally is in the order of a substantial visitation. There isn't really a criterion that applies to that. So it depends on the event in terms of whether you regard it. It's a judgment call in terms of whether you might regard it as a regional event. Examples that we've had experience of over time are things like the Kapunda Rodeo, the Farm Fair. They're the types of events that can attract quite a few, some in the order of thousands of people normally. Local events are at a smaller scale, probably more focused on the local community, maybe some regional attendance as well, but a smaller number in terms of broader than that. So as far as the other criterion are concerned, they're very similar in terms of what needs to be met in eligibility, but the funding amounts that apply are different. So if you're a business and going for or requesting a regional event, the upper limit is 5,000, obviously. For a local event, it's in the order of 2,000. So there is a distinction there that's worth considering in terms of the consideration that's given to allocating those funds.
So just to clarify, so a business and a regional event is an upper limit of 5,000, and then it's something different beyond that. Is that right?
For a local scale event, it's in the order of 2,000 as the highest amount.
For local
Yep.
events.
The distinction there in between the two is the visitation that's projected.
So this is probably more of a comment, and it's my last one, but I do feel as though it would be prudent for council to consider quantifying in numbers somehow what constitutes a regional event and a local event and what have you. But, you know, as I say, we're talking about this at the moment, aren't we? So thanks, Craig.
Councillor Collins?
Oh, you see, the Granite Tavern and the Seppeltsfield, what's the difference in number of 10?
Right, the difference in number in terms of attendees, no, they're very similar. The distinction that was made in terms of the assessment from staff was the connection, if you will, between the SRBA Inc. event and the Vintage Festival. It was one of the three that I understand they've linked in as part of the overall event. So it's provided as a component of a broader regional event. As a standalone, it's very similar, but the fact that it's under the broader umbrella was a factor that was taken into consideration. Also, the fact that it's an incorporated body that would be undertaking its event, and it had its own insurance and those types of things as well, of course.
So the point you're making is that a tourist is more valuable to us than a local. So you're prepared to back a tourist operation, which is someone from outside of the area, rather than enjoyment of the local people.
Well, through the chair, I was simply saying that we made an assessment in terms of the criteria.
Well, that's not what you were saying, or that's not the point you're making then?
No, not at all. We made a recommendation for the committee to consider based on the criteria as we read them in the guidelines and the policy. It wasn't a judgment about the distinction between the types of applications.
Councillor Allison?
Through the chair, Bill, can you just tell me who makes that decision? How's that process come about?
Well, the assessment process is conducted by staff, and Lorinda Bailey has led that process over time and done a difficult job very well, in my estimation. But ultimately, the committee is the decision maker in terms of the recommendations that are put to the committee, insofar as then making a recommendation to the council. The council is the body that determines when the funding is distributed and in what quantity.
I think Councillor Fabio might have been.
Through the chair, please. I draw focus back to the point that you made about or the categorisation that you use for not for profit. So when I look at the Seppeltsfield Road Business Alliance function that they're proposing, $5,000, that was requested $5,000, which has been promised to them. I see the Seppeltsfield Road Business Alliance as a niche business group, which would directly profit from such an event. Sure, there would be some funds that would go back into the broader community, but the majority of the people that would profit from that event would be the business Seppeltsfield Business Group themselves. How does that quantify for as a non-for-profit compared to, say, the No Quiet event, which has been proposed, which has been organised and facilitated by a member of the public, not a business entity?
Thanks for that. And through the chair, I suppose the distinction in our assessment was the SRBA is an incorporated body and they're representing a business alliance. So it met the criteria insofar as it's incorporated.
So based on the assessment that you've made, you said that the judgment's been made based on the figures, et cetera, et cetera. Is there scope there to change that assessment?
Through the chair, absolutely. The assessment is the judgment or the advice, if you will, that the staff are providing to council. So council can make the decision however it wishes to. And it's only a recommendation until the point of a decision. So if council wishes to amend the amounts, that's a matter for council to determine.
Thank you, Craig.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. We could spend a fair bit of time debating whether it's what classification or that sort of stuff. It seems to me that a judgment was made which was reasonable according to the guidelines, but it also seems to me that there are aspects of this application that make it a bit special. And so I think there is justification in us saying, acknowledging that although the assessment, the recommendation was clearly within the guidelines, there is a case to provide some more funding, given the special circumstances in this case, and given that point you made earlier about the event strategy could be refined a bit to give us more flexibility. And so I'm not suggesting redistributing the existing funds, but adding extra, and that can easily be picked up by a review, because a budget review is not going to be very much money. So I think we can make a case, if we choose to increase the amount beyond the 1,000 without in any way saying that what was recommended was not correct.
Councillor Michael.
I am curious. Relevance does it have? Either not, or
So again, through the chair, the need for an incorporated body to be involved or auspicing an applicant is more around the management and handling of public funds. So it's about council having, I guess, an assurance, if you will, that the public money that it's distributing is being taken through a process where a body is receiving that and then will verify and acquit that amount at a later time. Some applicants aren't necessarily attached to or individuals. They may not be attached to an incorporated body to have that available. So we ask that they be auspiced by one. In the example that we're looking at, there was a connection with the RDA Barossa for that purpose at one point. However, through the evolution and the assessment process, the connection with the Greenock Creek Tavern was seen to be sufficient, because that is a business and therefore can perform that function. And that fits under the regional event aspect if the council wishes to regard this particular application that way. Does that assist? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Craig.
Can I have one more question, please? I was on the committee and I voted for the recommendation, because looking at just at the report that we've been given, the applicant number 5, Den Hill and Greenock Creek Tavern, as you mentioned, is a for-profit business. But I wasn't aware, maybe that's my mistake, and that's quite possible, that the event is being auspiced by the RDA. And as you just mentioned, that makes it secure that public funds don't get abused and all that sort of stuff. So I was never aware of that fact, and that's why I voted for it. But now, afterwards, I became aware that that's actually the fact. And so the Greenock Creek Tavern is only involved for insurance purposes. So in my opinion, I wasn't really informed properly when I made this decision. So that's why I think it's quite important that we can change that. And I just wondered why these facts weren't there, or if I just overlooked them.
So through the chair, I think, if I may, I'll have to return to the SED committee report, but I thought there was discussion, or at least mention of the RDA connection. However, if I recall, the fact that the Greenock Creek Tavern was involved, maybe it needed to be explained in a little bit more detail, but that connection allowed for the RDA aspect to not necessarily be as crucial. And in particular, because there wasn't the insurance connection, that was a matter that needed to be worked through. So my understanding of the chronology, if you will, was through the process of of discussion, was realised that the Greenock Creek Tavern was able to provide that aspect of our criteria, and therefore also the auspicing element wasn't necessarily as critical. I think I have that correct. Lorinda, is there anything you need to add to that? No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Councillor Simon. Anything further, councillors, on that matter? If there's not, we have a recommendation there. At times.
Could I change the amount? For the downhill one, he's asked for 4,790. I think we've given him 1,000. I think I can't see why we can't give him the full amount if we can find it in the budget.
Well,
Right.
councillors, you have any further views on the matter?
Maybe I didn't hear, did councillor Collins suggest an amount or not? I didn't quite hear that.
I suggested the full amount of 4,790. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm moving that the full amount be provided for the quiet event in Greenock, 4,600, whatever it was.
790.
It's moved by councillor Collin and second by councillor Fabio. Would you like to speak to your motion? I think you have. Councillor Bill, sorry.
I note in the application, the Seppeltsfield app applied for 2,000, between 2,000 and 5,000. That was their request. They didn't ask for 5, they asked for between 2 and 5. I just would suggest perhaps to Councillor Collin want to look at changing the Seppeltsfield's application, allocation.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, have we seen a budget for this before we approve it? We'd be an idea to have a look at the budget for the event. Is it there? Mr. Fabio?
Just for the basis of formalities, the motion's been passed and it's been seconded. Do we vote on this or are we still in discussion?
No, you're quite right. The motion's been put. I've asked if councillor Collin would like to speak to his motion. He's done that. Someone has seconded the motion, which was councillor Fabio. You want to speak to that, to seconding the motion? Are there any speakers against the motion? There are no speakers against the motion. I'll put the motion.
Disagree.
Certainly.
What you do anything for the wording of that motion in terms of adding any components or adjustments?
I think we should, yes.
Yeah, I think we need to be quite clear what the motion is, what the actual wording of the motion is going to be.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. What I was thinking is that given the way that the present motion is structured, it includes a 2, 3 and 5 add up to, sorry, the amounts under 2, 3 and 4 add up to the amount that's being distributed under part 5. I was simply going to suggest that perhaps part 5 be replaced with a further component which adds the additional amount that Councillor Ross is looking to add, in the order of 3,500. Which I think Carrie's got some words for, and that the subsequent component that relates to the no quiet also be amended for the full amount, just so that flows through. Does that make sense? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
That's okay. I hope that's clarified the wording. It needs to be right, because it'll be picked up if it's not, and we don't want to see any hold-ups with this being adopted and being the funds being made available. So if we're clear on what the wording of the motion is, we've had a mover and a seconder of the motion. We've had no one speak against the motion. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Sleep easy tonight, young Dan. And well done for putting this event together. I think you've seen the council totally support you unanimously. So hopefully we'll all get down there and have a look at it. We promise to be quiet. But well done, and thank you for being here as well. Councillors, we move on now to the next matter, which we moved to withdraw, which was Item 6, the updates of the urban design mapping for Kapunda Township. Is there any update from the council officers in relation to this matter?
Yeah, through the chair, other than to say there's been a memo distributed to council answering some questions from councillor Colin Ross.
Someone like to move a motion in this respect?
Can we ask questions?
Yep, let's open it for questions.
So just to Karen, just going on the answers to the questions that I did ask. So the 185,000 that you budgeted for the mapping, what is that all just for mapping, or is that for a few other things as well?
Yeah, through the chair. So that the report that is referenced under item 9.1 for the Economic Development Panel meeting articulates the program that we're looking to deliver over the medium term, which is funded from that budget. So it's in that particular account. Economic Development Panel meeting report and subsequent council report.
Further questions, councillors? If not, would someone like to move a motion? Councillor Dean? The motion being that we adopt this recommendation. Take it. Do I have a seconder? Don't have a seconder at this point. Councillor Bill, would you like to speak to it? There's no speakers for or against the motion. Councillor Simon?
Yes, I won't be supporting this motion because I can't really endorse the draft urban design mapping and associated table of actions and project sheet, like the way it's being presented. I think to me that looks like we're just going to compile another plan that's going to sit on the shelf and not do anything. I think we should spend our money more wisely.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. No further questions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
I think it's thanks, Mayor Bill. I'm not right across the detail of this, but one observation I would make, and it's a general observation that applies to this and some of the other recommendations or motions that appear in these minutes, is that we need to set timeframes around some of these things. So, it refers in item 3 to a report to a future meeting on the results of that feedback. What I'd appreciate more is that rather than it being a future meeting, it'll be at a point in time. I'll take advice on what that point in time would be, but
so you'd like to see the word future taken out of there and a timeline.
Correct. Yes.
Replaced. I think that's reasonable and fair. The mover of the motion was Councillor Rawlins. Councillor Dean, are you happy with that minor amendment?
I'm not sure what additional wording we're talking about.
It just says the recommendation as it sits here on point 3 says receive a report to a future meeting. We would like to see a date put there instead of the word future.
Mayor Bill, I'd like to be guided by what Corin would think is reasonable then.
Thanks, and through the chair. I guess what we've seen with community engagement exercises is trying to find a suitable window to map that out, knowing what other consultation council is looking to do with the community to ensure that we don't have consultation fatigue around certain matters. We've certainly seen that in the past. If you put too much out to the community at the same time, sometimes you don't get as much feedback. So that's a consideration in terms of an open-ended future meeting recommendation. However, that being said, I completely acknowledge the council's view to set some time frame around that. It's certainly our intention to complete this body of work this financial year. So, I guess if you're looking to move an amendment, I would place that maybe the July meeting of council could be something that we'll work towards.
I'd find that acceptable to include in the motion.
Thanks, councillor Dean. You satisfied with that, councillor Michael? So there's just a minor amendment to the, to point 3 to say instead of a report to a future meeting, receive a report at the July meeting. All comfortable with that, councillors? If so, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? 4-3, the motion was lost. It's carried. Hang on, 4. Oh, 5-4, sorry, the motion is carried. Can't even count. Thanks, councillor. Councillors, I'd like to seek the Asset and Call division. All those who are in favour of the motion, would you mind standing behind this seat? Yeah, the motion was change. No. The motion is lost, councillors. Councillors, I'd like your indulgence, if I may, to seek leave of the meeting to bring item 6.2 forward. We have John Conry online, who was chair of the CEO appointment panel, and John's only available for a short timeline. And I'm assuming John's available now. Curry? John's available. But I seek leave of the meeting and bring 6.2 forward. Excuse me? 16. Yeah, 16.2 forward, which means that we've already put the confidential section of this. Bring 16.2 forward. So if you go to your agenda papers, councillors, and look at 16.2 under confidential matter. So I need someone to move that way, that we have leave of the meeting. Councillor Dean, someone like second that. Councillor Simon. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Oh, thank you, Lorinda.
Through the chair, because it's a business application, it is paid by the applicant for the council to do the road closure on that Sunday.
Thank you, Lorinda. Well done. But yeah, it's gaining some momentum, that's for certain, and the complementary aspect of the makers market draws people up and down the street too, which is probably a good thing. But they are so totally different, the two markets. It's quite unusual to see that happen. We move on to reports for decision. First one being 11.1. Oh, pardon me, it's a recommendation on the bottom of page 19. My head's all over the place tonight, councillors. Please forgive me. Someone want to move that way? Councillor Lynn and Councillor Michael, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. We're up to 11.1, reports for decision. The first one being the Legatus Group Strategic Management Plans and Draft Business Plans and Budget. All of those documents are in our attachments, councillors, if you like to have a look through them. And you might recall very recently we had a presentation by Chairman Mayor Reid and Simon, the CEO. If there's no questions, I think there's a recommendation somewhere here, if I can find it. Yeah, on page 20, about halfway down the page, councillors, there's a recommendation there if someone would like to move that way. Thanks, Councillor Lynn. Would someone like to second that? Or Councillor Collin? Any questions, councillors? If not, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors. The Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority draft budget and draft annual business plan 11.2. Are there any questions, councillors, or any updates to this report?
No, nothing further to add.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions? There is a recommendation 2/3 of the way down page 24. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Collin?
Could I just ask one? So the 50 grand we agreed to pay them, has that developed that thing into a operational position yet?
Yeah, through the chair, not as yet. Our commitment is there. They're waiting for other councils to equally commit.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Further questions, councillors? And Councillor Michael is now our rep on that board. If not, no further questions. 2/3 of the way down page 24, there's a recommendation if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Michael, someone like to second that? Councillor Peter, all those in favour, those against, and that's carried. Thank you, councillors. Now we move on to 11.3. Planning events and disused railway precinct Kapunda, and I must commend this report. It's excellent and it's really spells out exactly where we are with this particular precinct and its possible future. So thank you, Corin, and your team for putting this together. It's really valuable information and a collation of activities and whatever that's been gathered over a long period of time. So hopefully we can move forward with activation of that particular area. Are there any questions, councillors? Or any further update, Kyron, to this report? No? Any questions, Councillor Michael?
First a comment, Mayor Bill said, yeah, thank you for what is a pretty comprehensive report. It's pretty dense subject matter. Would I be correct to say in final analysis, the conclusion or question that's put is that there would need to be consideration of a change in zoning in that area? There could be a consideration to a change in zoning in that area. Who initiates that conversation? Does that start here or does it start somewhere else? That's the question.
And probably more likely starts here, but I might pass over to Craig. He's more intelligent than I am in these matters. That's for sure.
I've had quite a few experiences with these, Mr. Mayor, over time, but
That's right.
look, the short answer is that it would start with council. In the report, we've indicated that there's maybe some value in an initial consultation exercise with the community just to really understand what those opportunities might look like. But then ultimately would be a project which would be looking to code amendment, and council is one of the bodies that can instigate one of those.
Thanks, Craig, for your response. So I guess a further question to that is sort of where to from here then. So that's the conclusion from the report. I'm not suggesting I've got a view on it either way right now, but I guess my question for the chamber and or whoever is, what do we do with this information, having now received it and the work that's been put into it?
From my perspective, I think it would be great to see some impetus take place to sort of move forward with this particular aspect of our business and our future, particularly in that precinct there, which was pretty untidy for quite some time, and it still requires considerable attention to bring it to where it should be. So perhaps it can be an agenda item that can just keep coming to each meeting till we actually resolve specific aspects of it. I think there are things in place now, like the bike trail and so forth, which are ongoing, and there's been some, I guess there's been some movement in that particular area, has there, Craig, with the Great Australian Bike Trail and whatever. Our own continuation of the walkways like Swan Path, etc. They're probably things that we could even implement without doing a lot. And hopefully we can take it down in bite-sized pieces and get something cracking, because if we don't make decisions, nothing's going to happen. Councillor Bill?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In the this week's Stock Journal, last week's Stock Journal, it's the Viterra are putting the silos up for sale, and the yard work, and so I think it's probably interesting that the planning zone comes up, because we don't know who's going to buy it and whatever. I don't know who'd buy a silo. Is it something that the council should look at if we're talking about silo art, that sort of thing? Then I suppose who's responsible for maintaining the silos if the council do look at purchasing it? Is it something that we should be looking at? I think it's perhaps the sale yards are an important article in the community, the rural community. So whether the agent's going to look at buying it or what, I mean, the actual value is pretty questionable, whether it's a negative or a positive. So perhaps if it's a negative, we should be looking at it all. So I just throw that in the pie because I think it's timely that we give it some consideration.
Perhaps this matter is a good subject for a workshop where we can lay it all out on the table and talk freely about what's down there, what could be improved, what could be taken away, and get some direction, because I think Kyron's department would probably enjoy that if you're getting some direction from the elected council as to what they'd like to see. We've got the information, we've put the reports together, we've got all the pretty pictures and everything else. We've got a fair understanding of what it's all about, but we now need to get to decision-making time to say what are we actually going to do down there and how are we going to do it and what resources are we going to put toward it. Otherwise, it just comes back with another report for another meeting, and we're no better off. So that would be just my sort of view on it. Colin, would you like to say something?
So the first thing we've got to do is rezone it, don't we? So should we pursue rezoning it?
That's a good point. And that's the sort of question I think would suit a workshop, because we would be able to make that decision there and then.
Can we move a motion?
Attached to other decisions that link into what's happening down there, because when you say rezone it, we'd want to know how much we're going to rezone and all of those questions as well. I think rezoning is a classic action. There's no doubt about that. But what do we actually rezone and how much?
But wasn't that the question that was asked by Bridget? She wants it rezoned. So the whole idea of the report was to look at rezoning it. So maybe we should be rezoning it. If it starts, like Michael asked, and it starts with council, do we move a motion or something that, investigate rezoning it and for future development, because there's no point not having it zoned for development if it's still in the state it is at the moment.
As long as we're absolutely clear on what we want to do with it in the future. Otherwise, you might have to try and rezone it again, because it might not fit what you actually want to do. Mr. Mayor, working out exactly what you want to do might be the first step, and then look at the appropriate rezoning boundaries of that. Could be wrong. Craig, would you like to say something?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. The report gives us the opportunity to look at these types of options, but to look at instigating a code amendment as an example is a project that requires a budget, and the state has requirements in terms of instigating a code amendment, which are in the order of about $30,000 from memory, because there's state costs that need to be covered there in terms of the engagement and other processes that they seek an input for financially. But if the desire of the council is to take this exploration a step further and to look at specific rezoning options, I mean, in the report, we've indicated there'd be some value in looking at an initial consultation phase, which might inform that further. But if it's the will of the council, we can bring back a further report that's more focused on a rezoning option. My question would be, if we're looking to rezoning at this point, what would you be looking for the outcome to be in terms of the rezoning that we're looking to do? As I've indicated, some of the zoning that best suits some of the activities that we've been talking about, and I've characterised it as a function centre, unanticipated in a township scenario. So there'd be some work to be done there in terms of identifying exactly what might be best suited to at least look at being suitable in that sort of direction, if you will.
Thank you, Craig. With that, Councillor Ross?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it just seems to be, since 2000 and, where these first reports done, it seems to be going for a long time with without being rezoned. Like, it's just, you just keep doing all these reports, and you can't even do anything there because it's not zoned properly. So why do we keep doing reports? Why don't we just, maybe we should have investigated the zoning part first, and then, then hopefully we can, because that good shed's going to fall down. Like, it's just the way it's going, whether we could get it rezoned, and then you might be able to give it to someone for a 50-year free lease and they could renovate it or, restore it. But if we keep going the way we are, like, these reports have been going for 20 years and the hole gets bigger every time you drive past. So, you can keep talking about rezoning it, we'll be doing next year. So I just think we get on with it and rezone it or investigate if it can be rezoned.
Well, that's why I was recommending that we sit down and have a workshop about exactly what we want to do down there. Then we can decide how we're going to rezone it.
Mayor Bill, Lisa would like to have a word. Lisa would like to have a word.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. I think whilst I appreciate the intent behind a rezoning, just appreciate that there's a time frame that goes with that, and anything that you can achieve within 12 months with the rezoning is going good. You don't have to rezone land to get a development approval, Councillor Ross. So we've spent considerable time with Bridget. We met again with Bridget and her business partner just over 2 weeks ago and advised again what the process would be. So whether you rezone it or whether you stay with the zoning on the land right now, it doesn't change what you need as part of a development application. The goods shed already has an active approval over it. It doesn't need to be rezoned. These are all options we can explore, but it's not fundamental to enabling development right now. And I think that's what the council needs to understand, is that there are development opportunities right now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was very refreshing news, because it seems like we can do something, and we just got to work out now as a council what exactly we want to do. I think that's fair, and I think a workshop might be the way to go about it. Bringing it to the chamber here, I think there'll be a lot of ideas, but once again, it might not go anywhere, and we want to see something happen. Councillor Simon?
Since that information from Lisa, which was very helpful, I think maybe what Craig's offered that to have a community consultation to then inform our workshop to find out what we actually want to do, that might be a good idea. A question I have is, this report is on the report for decisions, but we're not making any decisions. Can we turn this recommendation into a decision? Maybe that we're gonna go for some community consultation or something like that. Can we change that?
Well, there's a recommendation there, but you don't have to adopt that recommendation. Of course, if you'd like to put up a motion, that's quite acceptable. If you'd like to move
I
a
think it'd be a
motion.
great idea to go for community consultation, just to find out what people actually want to do. But maybe most people think that things should be bulldozed. I mean, I don't, but who knows? So I think that would be quite valid information what the Kapunda residents and the wider Light Regional Council residents actually want to do with that site.
So you're
I would
suggesting
propose
we go.
if we can start some sort of consultation process, but as Craig suggested, I think that'd be a great thing.
Would you like to move a motion in that respect?
We probably need to have some bit more better words than that, just uttered, but yeah.
Oh, we get what you mean.
Okay, good. As long as you understand it, you can. That was actually my problem. That
Yes, Fabio, would you like to say something?
Yeah, given the given the clarification that that Craig's given in the report, and also the additional clarification from Lisa that suggests that you know, we can sort of still strive forward a little bit with development of these areas without a rezoning or whatever. I think it'd probably be a pertinent idea to maybe just hold off on the time being, given the information that Councillor Bill's given, until I guess we find out indefinitely who's buying the silos, or you know, if anyone's going to buy them, and what their proposed future use would be. Rezoning that whole area, particularly if it crosses over Hancock Road into the southern area, might actually sort of might end up having to backtrack if someone that buys the silos has an intention to use them as a grain storage facility.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think, you know, and at the same time, if they come up for a steal and the council decides to buy them, then that might be the opportune time to then look at rezoning and incorporating that area south of Hancock Road, so it's just done in one foul swoop rather than bits and bobs.
Thank you, Councillor Fabio.
So as a storage capacity, they advertise the tonnage that they can be stored there. So whether that's, well, that's, I suppose they say you fix the elevator, I suppose, but that's what they say as an ongoing storage facility.
Councillor Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Bill. So just putting all that together and conscious, you know, of the sentiment, again, as I said initially, I'd hate to see this sort of fade away into a draw somewhere. Can I suggest we take up your suggestion, Mayor Bill, of having a workshop or something in the next couple of weeks or before the next council meeting to, you know, get some more information from you know, people within council about what the options are and understand the issue a little bit better, to inform perhaps a report to council by May on what options are available for those areas. If I need to put a motion to that effect, I'm happy to do that. If we need a motion for a workshop, I don't know, but
I think we've already have a workshop on the 4th of April.
we do now.
Am I correct in saying that? Oh, okay, yeah, we couldn't include this with that, but no.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like the council to be involved, like conscious of what the Viterra site's selling for, and say, can somehow the officers make that inquiry, or what's the procedure for that? Just so that we've got the information there.
Yeah, I think that would be quite simple to undertake. Just get a cost that Viterra might be looking at to
I think it's just an expression of interest at the moment, but at least we could make some inquiries to see what
the bottom line might be, even if some parameters. So that would help.
Yeah, through the chair, we can make contact with our Viterra counterparts that we worked on as part of looking at silo art on the site. just to see, yeah, where their process is at and how that might play out.
You know, that would be a start. Well, we would have to probably give some more thought then to this workshop, I suppose, and maybe it's between now and the next meeting, we try and pick up as much information that might be required for any planning change down there or development, what might be there and what would be required if the things that we agree to are implemented. What boundary changes we would need to make under the Act and how. Under the code, I should say. It's not an Act anymore, is it?
We'll just try and together what would be a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I suggest a motion then to the effect that council holds a workshop to consider planning and zoning options in respect of the railway precinct? Zoning options, yep, in the railway precinct or the disused railway precinct in Kapunda. To be held at such a time to enable a report for decision to come to council. Report for decision to be presented to council at or before the May 2023 council meeting. Yeah, thanks. Ordinary. Yes, sure.
We'll have to turn our minds, councillors, if we adopt this recommendation, we have to turn our minds to when we want to conduct this workshop. If we're going to deliver an outcome for the May meeting.
So, Mayor Bill, respectfully, I've been deliberately vague on the date so that it allows us time over the next couple of months to, well, someone can fix that date, something of it.
I think that's good. We comfortable with perhaps going down that path of the workshop first and trying to get some facts together as to what we actually want to do.
The only thing I was just asking, so all that land actually is owned by the state government, isn't it? So we're going to have to get permission for them to do anything we'd want anyway, wouldn't we? Or can we do what we like with it?
Yeah, so I guess through the chair, if we're looking at the whole precinct, there's a whole mix of land ownership. Some is within sort of council ownership, some of it's public roadway, some of it's state government land, particularly the rail corridor itself. Some is Viterra owned, and some just in private ownership. So there's a whole sort of mix there, but certainly the state government is one party to that. We've had conversations with state government around leasing the rail corridor, which council does at the moment for sections of the Swan Path that has been built. State government has also outlined an unsolicited proposal process that council could offer to purchase parts of the rail corridor as well. So that could be an option in terms of ownership for if that's something that council wanted to explore.
Thanks, Kyron. Any further questions, councillors?
Mr.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, is May realistic?
Yeah, given that it's almost April, possibly not. Want to expand that out, Toad? What's the thinking? Move it out a little bit? Maybe June?
My preference would be that it'll be the fourth week of May that there's a report. I haven't specified what needs to be in the report for decision, but I guess what I'm emphasising is there needs to be a decision made about something. So
yeah,
that's the request. What comes out of the workshop might be a report on these options, and the report for decision might be, well, council needs to make a decision about taking this next step or that next step.
Yep.
And the intent of the motion is to make sure we're taking steps and
Yep.
not standing still.
Well put. I think that's an excellent sort of, strategy to implement. We'll get something done. Okay, we have a motion up on the screen, and we have a mover. Would someone like to second that motion? Thanks, Councillor Fabio. Are there any questions or discussion in relation to this particular matter? Councillor Simon?
If I may, one question, I just still wonder if we should involve the community somehow into this before. I'm always for bottom-up grassroots sort of decision making. So if we come and say like that's what we want, and then go to the community, I find it the wrong way around. We should ask what the people actually want.
Yeah.
So I personally don't have an opinion other than I want what the people want. So
I know what you're saying, Councillor Simon, but I guess we've got to make sure what we're taking to the people is to give them something to make a decision about. If we're just going to go out there and say, what do you want to see happen? Then we're going to get 10,000 different answers. What are we going to do with that?
Through the chair, if I could respond to Simon, I think you've summed it up in a nutshell, and that's probably going to be one of the first findings out of the workshop, is that we at some stage have to involve community for consultation, either about the ideas, timeframe, budget, whatever. So, yeah.
That's always a given in all these sorts of matters. When you're going to make a major redevelopment of an area, you're going to ask the community if you can do it. I think under the Act you've probably got to. But we want to make it clear when we go out to the community what we're proposing. So we need to decide what that's going to be and the options that we've got available to us. And the only way we're going to do that is to get together and talk about it. And I don't know if the council meeting is the best format to do that in. It's probably better to do done at a workshop, where it's a little bit more freer in our movements of discussion, etc., not so formal. But you're the elected members, so I'm here to be directed. That's just my view. But the recommendation is up there. If and I have a mover, I'll have a seconder. We'll put the recommendation. Do I have a seconder to that recommendation? Thanks, Councillor. Oh, sorry, Councillor Fabio. Yep, my memory's gone as well. All those in favour? Those against? You must vote. Thanks, Councillor Collins. All right, the motion is carried. Thanks, councillors. We might be able to move on to the next matter, which I believe is 11.4. Is the preparation of a draft light regional events strategy. And thank you to all the authors. It's another very comprehensive report, and I think it's an excellent report, and it's giving us a really good direction. And no doubt we'll pose a lot of questions. So I'll put the matter to council. Are there any questions or any updates from the staff, first of all? No updates from the staff. Are there any questions that you council members would like to ask? We have a series of recommendations down the bottom of page 23, which are fairly straightforward and very practical, I would think. Councillor Simon?
Yes, and since last time when this came around, which was last meeting, it sort of got voted down. I just wondered what is really different now than last time. It's just, I mean, this is a great report and talks about everything and back and forth. But I mean, it seems not that relevant to what we want to do. I mean, what the general, tourism turnover is of Australia, that is superb. But I mean, there's really very little to do with Light Regional Council. So I just wondered what has changed since last time we voted it down.
I'll have to refer to the authors. Would any of the authors like to answer that question? Thanks, Corin.
Yeah, through the chair. So obviously there's some additional context and information's been added to the report. I guess some examples showing how various funding streams could be staged and implemented over time as opposed to concurrent application. And I guess in terms of the recommendation seeks to, I guess, clarify what the outcomes of a draft event strategy might be.
Further questions, councillors? If there's no further questions, I've got a series of recommendations at the bottom of page 23, of page 39. If someone would like to move that way. Councillor Dean? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Dean?
Thank you, Mayor Bill. Yes, I do. It's important, I think, to have a framework which enables us to understand the different kinds of events that can be held. It's important also to examine what's practical and what's not practical at the present time, which may change in the future, given the growth of our council that's going to occur due to Roseworthy and other developments. And just because we have outlined what can be, doesn't mean we have to do it. And the important thing to stress is here, which I think is really important, is that we are providing some flexibility so that we can grasp opportunities easily when they arise. For example, with the development of the football Dutton Park complex, if I don't know what the name is, but you know, the fancy big football thing. I'm not a footballer, so you probably gathered, could happen with relative ease. The example we gave of the branched out event in here, and I was involved with that at the time, it was, the timing of that was a bit difficult, a bit fraught, because we needed to make a decision fairly soon, and the council meetings and all that sort of stuff, where if we have a strategy that allows us to consider those things in some sort of mechanism, then that will make it easier. The point is that this is producing a draft strategy, and then if we don't like it, or some aspect of it, we can do what we have done so far, which is say we don't like that bit. But to throw the whole thing out, which almost seems to be what's being suggested, I think is extremely short-sighted. My experience on council over the time from when I first got on the council to now, we developed lots of policies and lots of strategies, which to my mind have made life a lot easier for council and for council staff, because we have thought about directions, and so there's a lot less ad hocery, which I think is a bad way to run things. So basically you're just chasing your tail and reacting to things all the time. That's stupid in my view. So this is actually a step in the right direction, and we need to map out the whole lot and then say, this is what we can do now. We can't do that, we've got cash. But that's something that can happen. And if an opportunity arises, for example, someone offers to do something for us and we've got to put in a bid, then we've got the flexibility to do that. So that's why I support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. Does anyone like to, Councillor Cullen?
I actually agree with most of what Dean has said. The problem I do have is, you know, it's a very good report and it's well written, and we've used the Tilma group to get to where we have now. So, can I make an amendment to that or not?
No, it hasn't been seconded yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can we get someone to maybe second that motion that's up on the board?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to second that motion. Like tonight, even with the Dan and the general thing, if the event strategy had been a bit more precise, it would have come through. It would have been applicable. So the staff did what was in the current event strategy. If the event strategy was different, it would have been far easier. So we need to have a strategy. Let's get it done. Right.
So I've got a mover and a seconder, and Councillor Ross would like to make an amendment to that.
Well, the only thing is, like, because I think there's, I think we've got very good staff who could, I think, write one, and I was wondering whether we could just drop off, instructs the acting chief executive officer who may delegate the relevant council officer to draft an event strategy. That, so we don't have to collaborate with the Tilma group, because I think we've got a lot of stuff from the Tilma group already. I think that we could have a very good, well-written strategy without using externals, and I think, you know, and would save a bit of money, and I think it'd be something that we would have produced and we can use. So that's, if I
Are you putting that as an amendment to the motion,
If
councillor?
that's the amendment, is to drop out the collaborate with the Tilma Group, so you drop that out.
I need to ask the mover if that,
He's moved an amendment.
I've moved the amendment, I don't second it, if no one seconds me, I'm out, so.
oh, okay.
Maybe a second, if I can speak to that as well. I mean, at no point was I suggesting that we don't need an event strategy. Obviously we do. But what I'm similar to what Councillor Ross saying is like, I'm just flabbergasted. We got really good staff that could easily write out of all this beautiful information we already got. We could easily have them write. Like we can see that the quality of these reports, it's mind-boggling. So why can't they just write an event strategy? It's done. Like we don't need. We got the information. We got everything. So I'm happy to support his motion.
Second the amendment.
I think Bill,
Can we just ask the staff whether they can do it, Lorinda in particular? She's the one that'd be good at the job, wouldn't she?
Just 1 second, councillor.
Please.
Yeah. Yep. I think we need to put the amendment to the meeting and see where it goes from there. And then we'll take your question, councillor. So I'll put the amendment that takes out point 3 of the recommendation, and the recommendation remains the same with point 3 being removed. Is that
Mayor, but I
correct?
thought it just took out the words to collaborate with the Tilma Group.
Well, just
The rest of
to,
it stays in.
To collaborate with the Tilma Group.
okay,
It just says the CEO delegates to the relevant council officer, then this is to draft the strategy.
okay. So we take out to collaborate with the Tilma Group. Is that correct? Right, okay. So that's the amendment. I'll put the amendment, it comes a motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. So the recommendations there as are, with the amendment being to take out to collaborate with the Tilma Group to draft an event strategy. So thank you, councillors. That's adopted. Bill, does that answer your question or?
Not at all, Mr. Mayor. I was asking, have the staff got capacity to do it? If say, would we expect them to do it the next 12 months, or when do we expect them to be done?
Sure, that's a fair question. Corin, could you perhaps look at that? You think believe staff have got the capacity to do this function?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, through the chair, we'd have to have a look at our capacity. We have a contract in place with Tilma Group, so we'll have to look at negotiating with them on what information we need from them to close out in-house delivery, number one. So there may be some cost impacts to accessing the information, particularly the engagement I've had with, I guess, event organisers over the journey and SATC and the like. So we don't have that information that Tilma Group does. And from there, we'll probably get a feel for how much we need to distill down and what resources that we need to throw at it internally and a time frame. So I probably can't answer that at the moment. There's a bit of information we'd need to collate around that.
Thanks very much, Corin. That answer the question, Bill, to reasonable satisfaction? Yeah, I can understand where the motion's going with this, and but I can also understand from a staff perspective as well. It's not so straightforward. But we have a mover and a seconder, and I think we adopted the motion, if I can recall. So we can move on.
Excuse me, Mayor Bill, I don't think we have. All we've done is passed an amendment. The amended motion now becomes a motion, and we do have to vote on that, I believe.
I thought we did. No, all right. No, we haven't. Okay. The amended motion becomes a motion. I'll put that. All those in favour? That's carried. So it's carried. Eleven point five, councillors, Dutton Park Incorporated upgrade project and a funding request. We had an excellent presentation from Dutton Park, you might recall. Thanks, Councillor Collins. There's a form in there that you may need to complete in your folder. Oh, good, thank you. You might have recalled the excellent presentation we had from Dutton Park at our last meeting. I think it was our last meeting. And this is an outcome from that, of course. There's a very broad recommendation about halfway down page 49. I open it up and ask if there's any update to this report from the council office. Any update to Megan on this report? No, we're all clear in that area. So the report there is open for discussion and movement and secondary, of course, if need be. Councillor Simon?
I do have a question on page 51, I think it is. It does say that as of 1st of July 2015, the contribution from council increased to $85,000. This provided DPI approximately $40,000 each year to put away for capital renewal. It would be fair to expect an amount of just over 300,000 would have been put aside and used for asset renewal. So I'm just wondering, so this to me sounds like an argument that they actually should have $300,000 and so they wouldn't need any money for us or because, or the other, yeah, so can I have that explained, please?
Thank you, Megan.
Through the chair, Councillor Simon, sorry, could you please explain the question again? What was actually the information you're after?
Yeah, so the question is, it says in there that it would be fair to expect the amount of just over 300,000 would have been put aside. So that sentence to me sounds like they should have that money, and so therefore it's justified to not give them the $300,000 that they're asking for. Is that correct to assume?
No, that's not correct to assume. It's just a statement that the money provided to Dutton Park after the second agreement process was followed, that they would have set aside some money for renewal. And that would be the amount. It's the $40,000 times the years that they've had that. They could have used that renewal for other things.
Mayor Bill, this, as I understand it, most of this development is actually upgrade, isn't it, rather than renewal? Some of it's renewal plus upgrade, but it's a lot of upgrade to newer standards and so on. So that would be unreasonable to expect them to have funded all that out of their renewal amount.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Any further questions, councillors? If not, the recommendations about halfway down page 49. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Michael and Councillor Dean. Moved in second. Would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Michael?
No, not really, Mayor Bill, other than to acknowledge it's great to see grassroots support in the community for initiatives like this, and I hope that the council can support the project as well.
Thank you, Councillor Michael. Councillor Dean?
I'll speak for as well. I support what Councillor Michael said, that the shortfall was actually around $60,000, and half of that has actually been obtained by community sponsorship and donations. So they've already made a very good effort to reduce that to the smallest amount that can. And whilst you could perhaps argue that some of the things that they decided to do that wasn't in the original plan that they perhaps should have anticipated, all of those things are really necessary to do. So what we'll end up with as a result of doing that is a facility that should last for a long time. Whereas if they hadn't done those extra things, I think they'd be looking to do them again fairly shortly. So that, in other words, they've done a proper job instead of half a job.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. Any further questions or comments, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. I had the great pleasure of being taken through those facilities the other night by Terry Ryan, and I've got to say they're absolutely incredible. Stephen Arns sharpened his pencil big time, and there's been a lot of other sponsors too that have come across very much, and they put a lot of dollars into this project. And I must agree very much with what Councillor Michael has said. This is grassroots stuff. The Dutton Park area down there is absolutely outstanding. it's a beautiful facility and it's been very well managed. And, I mean, we had our Australia Day ceremony there and, it was just immaculate, that place. And, it's a great credit to them. So, I'm just so pleased that we've been able to support this particular recommendation because I think it'll go a long way for that club to be, and that area down there to be for the future generations. So thank you, councillors. We move on now. That motion was adopted, Councillor Ross. Yeah, which you might be very happy to hear that. It was an excellent presentation we had a couple of weeks ago too, and I think that was evident by the decision tonight. We move on now to 11.6. This is a bit of housekeeping, I think, Craig, is it? The Rosebery Township Expansion Higginbotham request. There's a recommendation on the top of page 59. Certainly open to questions, or there's no update to.
Do you mind if I just say?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, it's just a brief one. In the report on page 61, we mentioned that the ICM has provided a calculation of the contribution that's needed to the fund in the order of 1.24 million. We've noticed I have a query about that calculation that I've not been able to follow up with the ICM. He's been on leave for the last week. So I'm just the independent case manager who's involved in assisting to administer the deed. So that might need to be, once I've had a consultation with him, revised down. It doesn't affect the resolution or the recommendation, sorry, that's put forward. But I just wanted to highlight that might be an outcome after I've asked him that question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for pointing that out, Craig, as I don't think, I certainly didn't take much notice of it. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Simon?
There's the one question I always have about those trees down there, because it looks like the road's going to be, the Kangaroo Road's, flat road's going to be done entirely with curbs and everything. And I just wondered if those trees are appropriately protected or what's going to happen with them. That old standard trees that's been there for a few hundred years.
On what road?
It's on Kangaroo Flat Road. Yeah.
Kangaroo Flat Road. Yeah, is there any way we can answer that question?
Well, through the chair, I think the last time the question came up, we have been trying to have negotiations in relation to trying to preserve those trees. We haven't had an agreement reached in respect of that. They are within a road corridor that's an open road. So we're mindful of that in the consideration of these items. But it's an ongoing matter, but we are finding that it's a difficult negotiation, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for that, Craig.
So does that mean they're going to be cut down? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying there's a possibility that they might need to be at the end if the negotiations aren't successful, through the chair.
Is there any way that council can do anything about that, or is it just that's the process?
Well, look, we've certainly been looking at exploring a number of options to avoid that outcome for the very reasons that Councillor Simon has raised, given their historical significance and they're established. But given that they are within a road corridor that is established in that area and it's gone through the process of rezoning and concept planning around that, the negotiation is to effectively look at diverting roads and so forth, and that does get complicated, Mr. Mayor. As an alternative, for example, if we're able to manage that. We are still going through processes, but I'm just highlighting that it remains a possibility, unfortunately, in the circumstances.
Just a quick question. And does Michael Higginbotham know about this?
All developers.
Yeah. Does he personally know though? Because if he doesn't, I can tell him on Friday.
I think all developers are aware, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No. No, he's generally on our side. And if he thinks it's a concern of council, I'm sure he'll try and do his best to do something about it.
I don't mean to be negative, but I'm mindful there is a possibility.
Sure, no, I really respect your honesty and the facts that you put forward, and that's the reality of it. There's a recommendation on the top of page 59, councillors, if someone would like to move that way. Councillor Dean, someone like to second that? Councillor Collin. Any further discussion, councillors? If not, I'll
Just-
put the recommend, councillor Simon.
So if I can have one more question, so does this recommendation make it any more difficult or less difficult to protect those trees? Has no impact on those trees, like of the safety of those trees?
No, well, through the chair, I mean, the proposal here is to gain access to that site through Kangaroo Flat Road. Now, we have highlighted that there are practical difficulties with that road in certain conditions. Certainly if it rains, it becomes more difficult to move through there, as is generally known. And there might be a need to look at alternatives, and I've mentioned that there's an access point closer to Twarts Road that might need to be accessed, if that was the eventuality, but we would have discussions with the Hickenbotham Group around that in those circumstances. But the question of the development of Kangaroo Flat Road beyond that will be progressive as it's needed to happen in terms of the deed. So whilst they might look connected, this is a point in time. It's for the period until the Horrocks Highway Kangaroo Flat Road intersection is upgraded, at which time I fully expect all access will go through the new intersection, or at least the majority of it, certainly. But for the time being, yes, there's a possibility that there could be more traffic going through there. But I understand that, you know, depending on the capability, that can happen at the moment, albeit a variety of vehicles, depending on their willingness to go through that vehicle. So, yeah, it's the possibility of the further developed road remains, but it's further projected out than this immediate matter.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any further questions, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. We move on now to section number 11.7, Strategic Planning Review of the Barossa Character Preservation District. Again, I'll pass to Craig for any update. Is any update to this?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair.
Has anything changed that we need to know about, particularly in this report? So it's pretty much a housekeeping matter. That be fair to say?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no further information other than I may look to bring a further report in April, just to tie in with what I understand the Barossa Council might also be looking to do at around that time.
So it's a work in
So I'm
progress.
foreshadowing there may be an additional report that comes secondary.
Fine. Councillor, are there any questions in relation to this? Councillor Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. I'll just note that there's a potentially an unbudgeted budget impact. Is that because it needs to be considered in the next financial year's budget? And do we have any sense of what that might be on bookends?
Yes, so through the chair, yes, it's foreshadowed for the next budget cycle. So something we'd be putting forward for this coming budget deliberation. And in terms of an amount, I understand it could be in the order of about 20,000 or an up to number around that sort of range. That's the best estimate we have at the moment.
It gives us a bit of a broad brush of the amount. Any further questions, councillors, in relation to this matter? If not, I'll put the recommendation on the top of page 65. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Peter, someone like to second that? Councillor Simon, all those in favour? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Ooh. 11.8, report on the Select Committee on Public and Active Transport. I think this was an outcome of a council request from a recent meeting. Are there any updates, Craig? No updates? Any questions in relation to this matter, councillors? It's a good report. Thank you for, for the thoroughness of this. It's given us a little bit of direction. We need considerable assistance from outside as well, but at least we've got some direction now. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Dean?
Not so much a question, not observation. I think the recommendations are pretty good, but one of the things is appreciation of the very important decent country roads for people. That is seeking for was comprehensive, but causing a low population density, distributed population in regional centres. We do need to have good local cars. And that's all we did on file here.
Are you looking to amend the recommendation anyway?
I need to say that that point be highlighted in the business one. That is need for transport options.
I think we'll put it straight up on the, you might need to repeat that, councillor Dean.
So because in the correspondence, highlight the need for without the original grade system forward.
Yeah.
And on the road conference, their asset accountability ratio, the original road network 27%. You know, that running down the
Councillor Peter, you accept that additional? I thought councillor Peter moved the original motion.
No, that was the previous one.
Oh, okay. Would someone like to move this particular motion? Councillor?
I would just like to make a comment to that. I mean, I totally agree that we're not going to get rid of any cars anytime soon, and that we need our rural road network. That's super important, and I have nothing against it. I'm just thinking that this is the Committee on Public and Active Transport. So obviously they're not specifically talking about rural roads. That's the only reason. But I mean, if that brings it across the line, I'm happy. I mean, to me, it's a bit of a moot point. Obviously, we need good roads, but that's why it's probably not in that in that report.
looking at public transport in regional areas, there aren't too many railway lines, so and there's not too many wings, so therefore you have to use roads.
All right, would someone be prepared to move that motion? Councillor Lim and Councillor Fabio. Any further questions, councillors, or additions or amendments? No. If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Thank you, councillors. And thanks for the report, Craig. Another one. Been a busy boy. We move on now with questions on notice, councillors. We have one from Councillor Michael, which was an excellent question and a very timely response as well. Would you like to add anything to this, Councillor Michael?
No, nothing specific to the question, other than my observations are particularly in Hewitt. The general feel is that there's not a great deal of support for the Town of Gawler's proposal. I'll take that on anecdotal views. And I note within the Town of Gawler's own council, there's not unanimous support for it, nor is there in the media. So I guess I look forward to the opportunity for the people in Hewitt and Gawler Belt and other areas that are affected potentially by this proposal to have their say on it. Hence the question, because I believe a tender has been called for a consultant. I think it's closed. So it'd be good if we can sort of start to receive some updates as that information comes down. And thank you for the response. I have had a good look through that information.
Yeah, it was a very good question. I think it's very timely too, because I think a lot of people are out there wanting to know what the heck's going on, and they've got the right to know. And it's been the silence has been deafening, hasn't it? So hopefully we'll get some conclusion to this pretty soon. It'll either go one way or the other. Either the consultants will get out there on the ground, or it'll be put to bed. Hopefully it's put to bed.
Does anyone know the Barossas? Because the Barossa were going to have a go, weren't they? And they changed their mind, didn't they? So
Yeah, Paul,
What's their position on,
They've still got a hand grenade sitting over our head, in terms of the submission that they put forward in the beginning.
yeah,
No,
Paul,
no, they haven't.
I haven't,
No.
Tony.
No, they just left it there and Bim keeps telling me that, oh, no, we never do anything with that. And I said, well, just remove it. I said, it's not good relations, is it? Oh, look, don't even worry about it, Billy. No, she'll be right. Well, just move. I don't know how many times I've asked him to take it away, but it still sits there like a hand grenade. And Bim, as much as anyone, should understand how that feels with Concordia and Gore at the moment, going through a similar sort of thing. He's got the hand grenade over his head, Concordia. If Gore sort of decide to continue with that. We want to get this mess tidied up and get back to decent relationships again. We used to have very strong relationships, but they're being questioned or they're being challenged, and it's very hard to sort of say everything's the same. It's not. But we want to get back to
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just, I noted in the Bunyip, I do a lot of reading, obviously. The back page of the Bunyip had a half-page ad put in by residents, instigating that they contact their Gawler elected members to vote on the boundary reform question this week or tonight, I suppose, in the affirmative. They wanted to support. So perhaps we need to be a bit more active, and we'll get a half-page ad in the back of the paper saying light ratepayers want to contact the Gawler elected members, tell them to vote against it, because it's certainly a public thing. It's a public thing at the moment.
So who's driving that?
Well, that was just listed all the names at the bottom were just ratepayers. There wasn't any elected members, of course, or any councillors.
Hello. After speaking to Bim at the forum, or after the forum, he said to me, if you would have gone with us and amalgamated Brosser and Light, that's his attitude. He's just joking about the whole thing. But I don't think he's particularly happy with Gawler about Concordia. No, he's really angry about that. And it was just interesting to think that he just passes it off.
Yeah, Richard would like to comment on that.
Yeah, through the chair, I think the key thing is the process that Gawler have gone through to get where they are. The Brosser effectively need to go through that same process. So for them to reignite their proposal, there's still a significant amount of work that they would need to do to get to the point that Gawler are at now. So from our point of view, it is absolutely business as usual for this council. There is a significant amount of work to do. And I think we let those others, take their time and take their resources. And if they wish to put them into that, so be it. It will be a decision that the Boundaries Commission will work its way through. But to me, it is still a significant time away from when we are going to be impacted, if at all.
Thank you, Richard. Anything further, councillors, on that particular matter? And we have another question on notice from Councillor Michael again in relation to elected members' business. Oh, pardon me, we've got questions without notice. Do we have any questions without notice? No, no questions without notice. We'll move on to 14 then, questions on notice. My mistake. I hope no one's counting my mistakes tonight. Oh, gee. Oh, we'd like to pay a penny for every one. We've got a motion from Councillor Michael in relation to this matter. Would you like to talk to your motion, Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. Just briefly, so I've been reflecting on the order of business that we have here at council over the past few months, and I've reflected on the Act and the regulations and the role of the elected body to council to facilitate or be a conduit from the community to council. And within the rigid structure that we have in our agenda. I think it's difficult for us to have, I'd like to say, free and open conversations about community issues outside of the order of business that we have. I'm also mindful that by necessity, these meetings need to be regulated and sensible, and it needs to be meaningful conversation. And it could be that in some meetings the agenda items not used if there's nothing meaningful to talk about. So that's my request of this chamber, is that we amend our meeting procedures, or whatever we have to do from a governance perspective, to include a standing agenda item for elected members' business.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Thank you for taking the time to provide the discussion point as well. It gives people context. Any questions, councillors, in relation to this matter?
Mr Mayor, just a couple of comments. I've nothing against the idea, but I think there needs to be a time limit stretched, because there's no specific time limit there. And my other concern is what actually happens if something's raised. I mean, our legal friend would say it's unless you're talking to a motion, you're wasting the council's time. So if we get up there and sprout about the trees growing on different side that they're planted the wrong sort, is that really achieving anything? Unless we've got a motion we can move to and do it. Are we then going to make it a motion without notice if we discuss it that night, or we then going to ask for a motion without notice to call for a report for what we discussed? I think somehow it needs to be it's constructive rather than just a verbal feast. That's my only concern.
Councillor Dean?
I'd like to speak about it too, but we haven't actually moved and seconded it yet. So there's not a question. I want to make a comment as well. So do you want to move and second it first, or?
Well, yeah, let's do that. Do we have, I'm sure Councillor Michael would like to move that. Do we have someone to second this motion? Councillor Emery, you've already spoken on it. Would you like to speak on this motion, Councillor Emery? No. Okay. Are any questions? Councillor?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment that there's a time limit spent on the limit of 5 minutes for each member.
An amendment, 5 minutes for each member. Councillor Michael, you accept that change? It's okay. So the motion's been amended. The agreement of the seconder, the mover.
If we're just, are we just considering this as a minor amendment into the original motion, or are we considering it as a formal? Just an adjustment. Just an adjustment. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. With 5 minutes allocated to each member. Available, yes. Yeah, big difference. Oh, yeah, sleep well tonight. Councillor Simon.
And through the chair, Bill, can I ask, is that per subject or just whatever?
No, one subject tonight, please, Simon, please. God, and no questions from you either, Simon.
Five minutes was the number. Not transferable. Do some trade-off. Okay, Councillor Dean.
Mayor Bill, I'd like to suggest a couple of things. One, that as in all the other things that we've got in council agenda that involves people providing an input. There are some fairly strict guidelines that have been produced, and I think we need to expand on the 5 minutes by having some strict guidelines if we go down this route. Bear in mind that councillors currently have 6 different ways that they can provide input independently to the meeting. One is the elect members communication, where you can briefly mention something. 2 is councillors can do a presentation using the presentation time that's already there. And as Councillor Bill said, if you actually want something to happen, a motion without notice, or preferably one with notice, is a much better way to do it.
Mhm.
The advantage of that, particularly the motion with notice, is that it is then there for the public to see, and therefore it's open and transparent. It also means you've thought it through, and hopefully you've checked with whoever you need to check with to make sure it's accurate, sensible. So when it goes up with. I'm just concerned with this proposal that, if not careful, council will appear like an unorganised rebel. It has that potential. Doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but there's that risk. We should be aware of that before we take the vote. The other thing is, and I think tonight demonstrated it, where something comes up which requires extensive discussion, we agree to have a workshop, or sometimes it goes to the committee and they discuss it in much more depth and more informally. I think if we cast our mind back to the last workshop, that the advice there was that Western Council needs to be predictable as much as possible, needs to be clear, transparent, well thought out. This isn't, in my view, if we do it this way. So whilst I think the idea is really good, I think we can do it better and more effectively using the existing methods, and what we need to do is learn how to use those well. If we learn how to use those well, then I think we can achieve what Councillor Michael was suggesting in a way that actually gets answers quicker and more efficiently. Having said that, I mean, if in there, I think that could have some use. I just think there's better ways to do it. So I'm not opposing it so much as saying it's not the best way to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I mean, what you raised there is perfectly legitimate. There are questions on notice, questions without notice, presentations at the start of the meeting if there's something important that needs to come up. Councillor's got the opportunity to present that then. I'm just a little bit sceptical, I guess, from my point of view, giving everyone 5 minutes to lead the problems that 10 people have come up to you and mentioned that they've got this issue with a road down the street and whatever. What's going to happen with that information? What are we calling for? We're just telling the council there's a problem. Unless we move a motion to go with it, it's fairly meaningless. It's just a whole lot of words, and it doesn't go anywhere. So, to get action from the council meeting, you generally need to have a motion adopted somewhere that triggers the action. Just talking about it, we do that a lot, and we criticise ourselves for it. We talk a lot and nothing happens, and this is probably would lead to a fair bit of that. And I think what you're saying, and I have to agree with a lot of it. It's nice to sort of bring all those matters to council that people talk to you about, but gee, there's a lot of them at times, and sometimes they're very, very minor. So who judges that as to what's important and what's not? It worries me a bit, and I think you've used the questions without notice and the motions on notice here particularly well, and then that's a great example for all of us to be able to use that. I think Simon in the past has used this system pretty well also, and got a good response from that. So I think it's already there, and you get a far more comprehensive response as well when it's in writing and it's been properly thought out what you're bringing to the council, rather than just 5 minutes of, gee, what am I going to say next? And then sort of off the cuff or trying to read something perhaps. That's just, from my perspective. It's certainly not suggesting that this shouldn't have been brought up. I think it should be. But I just question the way we would go about councillors having that input. Councillor Lynn?
It is a statement. It would then add 45 minutes to our meeting.
Oh,
If
that's right.
everybody had 5 minutes, that's 45 minutes added on to our meeting, which I think is quite a bit of time.
It is, and I guess if someone said, look, Mr. Smith came up and spoke to me yesterday, she's got this tree hanging over a fence and she wants to get something done about it. What do I do with it from there? Who am I directing that to? Am I asking an actual question, or am I just bringing an issue to the council that someone spoke to me about? That's the bit I get a bit confused with.
Mayor Bill, that's why if we have it, we need some fairly strict guidelines, because those things should go straight to the relevant department to fix.
Well, that's
And they shouldn't come to council meetings. That's not what council meetings are for.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
It will make your job a lot harder.
Oh,
This
I'm
motion.
thinking about that. Councillor Fabio? Did you put your hand up? Oh, Councillor,
no.
sorry. Oh, yeah. His hand looks like yours. Councillor. Councillor Simon.
Yeah, I think all the discussion's been very valid, and but I think we can just try it out, and if it doesn't work, we'll get rid of it again. So I mean, I don't really see that much either which way. If it works out well, then it's a good thing. If it doesn't, then we'll get rid of it again.
Once a law, always a law.
Well, who says that? Well, we can
Hard to
as well as
change
we
it,
can
once
introduce
it's
it. We can-
changed, it's hard to change it back.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to move it if we're at this point in time. Right?
It's been moved.
Seconded.
It's been seconded. So is there any further discussion on this particular matter?
One final point, I guess.
Close the debate.
I'm not suggesting everybody has to talk, find something to talk about, right, for 5 minutes. So it's, you know, and one thing that I guess made me think of it is Councillor Dean wrote a pretty good email a few weeks ago on rural roads, and it sort of occurred to me, at what point do we get, because like I might not want to put a motion on an issue or necessarily ask a question, but I might want to have a conversation with the chamber about, well, what are we thinking? What's the strategy going into budget deliberations on how we're going to deal with this issue? Because we were sort of cautioned at that workshop about having these offline conversations. And so it sort of, for me, it sort of came from percolating those few things around in my head. So, and I'd absolutely agree. It can't be an opportunity for us to, sit here and sing the blues about issues that should be dealt with, appropriately outside the chamber. So it's really for that. It's just an opportunity to have it's like in any other business thing on any other corporate agenda, right? It's sort of like that. But anyway, we'll put it to a vote. If it doesn't get up, I'm happy to move on. So.
Okay, I think everyone's happy. And Michael's closed the debate. So having done that, and thanks everyone for their input there, it was excellent. I'll put the motion as on the picture frame. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. But you've raised some excellent points, and there's no reason why we can't use questions without notice more often, because anything important that people are talking to you about is relevant, and there's a space for it. And there's emotions on notice too, which you've used very effectively. And I think we all can learn from your example and Simon's examples of the past, and Dean's to a large extent too over the period of time. He's raised some very good motions without notice and so forth. So, thanks councillors for that, and thanks for the healthy debate. Where are we now? Community emails. Oh, hang on. 14.2, Councillor Michael.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. So look, anecdotally, and I'm not suggesting that there isn't or isn't an issue here, but what I would like to do is try and clear it up with some data. Is that there's some feedback about response times that come from ratepayers and people in the community. So my request here is just around a report on the volume of inquiries that are coming through that light email address. Typical turnaround times for responses. Is there anything that's sort of
ground cobwebs on it? Do we have a system to track it? That's it. It's as complicated as that.
Yeah, Richard, you think, I think it's a reasonable request. And it gets our head around how our operation actually works, how
Yeah.
it functions. And it might be a resource problem where this council then can say, right, we haven't got the resources to do that. Let's get them. Let's put the resources in. We know what we want to see happen. And if it's not happening, we ask the question, and it's often down to resources. Well, at least we know then we can do something about it. So I think that's a pretty reasonable and fair sort of motion. Anyone like to speak for it as well?
Yeah, if I could speak through the mayor, from my own personal experience, Kyron was kind enough to direct me towards an app called My Local Council,
Oh, yeah.
which I've downloaded and I've used it on a couple of occasions now. It's a really great app to use. If you're not using it already, please do so. The first time you do it, you've got to put in your email address and details, name, phone number, etc. But then after that, it remembers it. So it does make it a lot easier. You can take a photo, put a brief description, the whole lot. Based on my experience and a couple of times that I've used it, the response time is incredibly fast, a lot quicker than I actually anticipated, to be honest. And therefore, I've sort of spread the word amongst the townsfolk, I guess, saying, spruiking the benefits of using that. Obviously, puts the complaint, the question, the issue in the system, and logs it, and they certainly get the email back with feedback. Might not always be what you want to hear, but certainly it closes the loop anyway.
No, that's great news. Thanks, Councillor Fabio. That's really excellent news, and that's precisely how we can communicate at a very wide level to our community, people you just never see. Oh, we've moved the motion. Do we have someone like to second that? Councillor Collins has seconded that motion. Any further questions, councillors? We've closed the debate. No further questions. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Now, thanks, councillors, and thanks, Councillor Michael, for bringing that to our attention also. Motions without notice? None of those at this stage. We move now into our confidential section. Once again, we have